All right, this video is just going to be extra examples if you need more work with graphing trig, more examples. So remember that with our sine and cosines, this number that's added either in the front or the back is your vertical shift. The a value that's multiplied right in front of the sine or cosine, that is your amplitude. And if it's negative, you could reflect over the x-axis. B controls your period, and your period is always 2 pi over the absolute value of b. If b is negative, you could reflect over the y-axis. And then D in here with the x, that is your phase shift. That is how far we scoot left and right. So, extra examples. We're just going to state the amplitude of each graph and what that means in comparison to regular sine or cosine. The amplitude of the first one is 3. That means that this is taller. It goes higher and lower than regular sine of x. Cosine, the amplitude here is 1/2. This one is shorter than. The maximums are only 1/2, the minimums are only -1/2. And y equals 17 over 12 sine of x. The amplitude is 17 over 12. This one is actually taller than regular sine because 17 over 12 is bigger than 1. For periods, we're going to state the period and describe what that means in relation to regular sine or cosine. For this first one, the period is 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. This one is skinnier than regular sine because it repeats more often. Cosine of 2 over 5, period, is 2 pi over 2/5, which is 2 pi times 5 over 2, which is 5 pi. That means this one is wider. It repeats every 5 pi instead of every 2 pi. And cosine of 1/2 x, the period is 2 pi over 1/2, which is 4 pi. This one is also wider than regular cosine of x. Next one, stating amplitude and period of this function and how it's related to regular sine or cosine. Ooh, this one has a weird typo going on, sorry. This is 4/7 times the sine of x. The amplitude here is 4/7. The period is 2 pi because there's no b value. This one is just shorter than regular sine. For this next one, the amplitude is 2. The period is 2 pi over 1/3, which is 6 pi. This one is both taller and wider than original cosine. 4 times the sine of pi over 4. We start off with amplitude. The amplitude here is 4. The period is 2 pi over 1/4, which is 8 pi. So our maximums are 4. Our minimums are -4. And we repeat every 8 pi, which means that doesn't even fit a full period on this graph. Sine starts at 0, 0. The middle would be at 4 pi, and it goes up first. So this one really, all we can get is that much. And then, ooh, we can get another minimum down here. Almost a full period of this graph on here. All right, -3 cosine of x. We start with our amplitude. Our amplitude is that 3. The negative means we reflect over the x-axis. And it always has a period. This period is 2 pi because there wasn't a b value. So that means our maximums are 3. Our minimums are -3. Reflection over the x-axis. All right, our period is 2 pi, so there's 1 period for me. Cosine usually starts up, but a reflection means it starts down. Middle will be up, and it'll be down. Add those zeros in, and then graph the rest. And there's our graph. Apparently I have another label for extra examples. Phase shift and what that means. Honestly, the phase shift, when I state it, it'll explain what it means. This one, the phase shift is pi over 2 to the right. Means I took the whole graph and just scooted it over pi over 2. Y equals sine of x plus 3 pi over 4. The phase shift is 3 pi over 4 to the left. Scooted the whole thing left. And y equals cosine of x plus 5 pi over 6. Our phase shift is 5 pi over 6. Again, left. I just pick the whole thing up and scoot it over. Vertical shift. Again, vertical shift is very self-explanatory. So the first one, we have 3 plus sine of x. That is a vertical shift of 3 up. Y equals negative 4 plus cosine of x. That is a vertical shift of 4 down. And y equals sine of x plus 7. That's a vertical shift of 7 upward. Phase shift and vertical shift. Boom. Let's do phase shift first. So for this first one, our phase shift is 5 pi over 6. It's got a plus, so it's to the left. Our vertical shift is at 4. The 4 has the minus, so it's 4 down. For the second one, our phase shift is pi over 4. It's got a minus, so it's left. Our vertical shift is at 4. It's got a plus, so it's up. What am I doing? Up. There we go. And the last one here, our phase shift is 5 pi over 3. It's got a minus, so it is to the right. Our vertical shift is 5. It's got a minus, so it is down. All right. Phase shifts and vertical shifts for graphing. Start by saying, okay, well, our amplitude is 1. Our period is 2 pi. My phase shift is 3 pi over 4 left. And my vertical shift is 2 down. I like to start with my vertical shift. Make my new x-axis at negative 2. Amplitude is 1, so give myself some dotted lines so I know where to stay. 1 up, 1 down. 3 pi over 4 to the left, so my y-axis is actually moving right there. And my period is 2 pi, which means 2 pi away. My first period ends right there. So I'll draw in. I got sine, so sine starts at 0, ends at 0, middle at 0, goes up, and then down. Then I follow my pattern. Down, middle, up, middle, ooh, not that one, middle, down, middle, down, middle, up, and there we go. All right, 2 plus cosine of x minus pi. Start off, the amplitude is 1, period is 2 pi. The phase shift is pi to the right. And the vertical shift is 2 up. I start off graphing my vertical shift. Make myself some dotted lines for the maximum and the minimum. My phase shift is pi to the right, so my y-axis is going to be there. My period is 2 pi, so the first one goes all the way out here to 3 pi. This is a graph of cosine, and cosine usually starts at its max, ends at its max. So start at max, end at max, middle at min, cross the middle, in between. So middle, down, middle, up, oh, not there, up, middle, down, middle, up, middle, down, middle. And then connect these. And there is my graph. All right, another one with just vertical and phase shifts. Start by saying what those changes are. Amplitude is 1, period is 2 pi, because we're not changing that in these couple examples. The phase shift is 3 pi over 2. It's got a minus, so it's right. The vertical shift is 1. It's got a minus, so it's down. So I'm going to start off 1 down. My amplitude being 1 means my maximums are at 0. My minimums are at -2. 3 pi over 2 to the right, so draw in my new y-axis. Period of 2 pi. There we go. There's the end of one period. And we're dealing with cosine. So cosine starts at max, ends at max, middle at minimum. So maximum, maximum, minimum, zeros in between. And there we go. Continue the pattern. And there we have it. All right, next one up. Our amplitude is 1, our period is 2 pi. We didn't change that yet. Our phase shift is 2 pi to the right. Our vertical shift is 1 up. So I shift 1 up. My amplitude is 1, so my maximums are at 2. My minimums are at 0. My phase shift was 2 pi to the right. My period is 2 pi, so that means the first one ends at 4 pi. I'm drawing sine. Sine starts at 0, middle at 0, ends at 0. So instead of 0, we use 1. And goes up, then down. And I follow my pattern. With this one, notice that if I had not done my phase shift, my answer would look exactly the same. If I scooted over an entire period, it's going to look exactly the same. All right, now we're just going to state each piece of this. All right, we're not going to graph it right now. We're just going to say it. So this first one, the amplitude is the number out front, 2. The period is just 2 pi because there's no b value. The phase shift is pi to the right. And the vertical shift, there's no number, added or subtracted, so there isn't one. Second one, the amplitude is that number out front, the 4. The period is 2 pi because there's no b value. The phase shift is pi over 4 to the left. And the vertical shift is this 2, it's a minus, so it's down. And then -2 minus 3 sine of 2 times x minus pi over 4. The amplitude is 3. This minus is right in front of the 3's, so it's a reflection over the x-axis. The period is 2 pi over 2, which is pi. The phase shift is pi over 4 to the right. And the vertical shift is 2 down. All right, all these fun things to mention. All right, first one here. I noticed that my b value is not factored out, so I need to do that. I have -3.5 sine of 2 times x minus. We're dividing out the 2, so I divide 2 out of here. It's actually pi over 4 now, minus 1. So the amplitude is 3.5. with a reflection over the x-axis. The period is 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. The phase shift is pi over 4 to the right. And the vertical shift is 1 down. Now you may see other places where they don't factor that 2 out. If they don't factor the 2 out, then you cannot graph it the way that I showed you. So there's the kind of game changer. If you do not factor the 2 out, your phase shift won't be right, and you will not be able to use my graphing methods. You could still get to the correct graph, but your phase shift will be wrong, and you'll get there differently. So this next one, we want to factor that 5 out. So I have -4 plus 3 cosine of 5 times x. We divided 5 out of the 5x, so I divide, so it's pi over 15. So my amplitude is 3. My period is 2 pi over 5, so 2 pi over 5. My phase shift is pi over 15 left. And my vertical shift is 4. It's a minus, so it's down. There's a reason we're not graphing these ones, because pi over 15 would be rough. And this next one, I have to factor out that 7. So I have 1/10 times the sine of 7 times x plus, divide out the 7. I get 3 pi over 28 minus 4. So the amplitude is 1/10. The period is 2 pi over 7, so 2 pi over 7. The phase shift is 3 pi over 28. And that's to the left. And the vertical shift is 4 down. And there we go. All right, let's graph a few more. 2 times the sine of x minus pi. First off, my amplitude is 2. My period is 2 pi. My phase shift is pi to the right. And vertical shift, there is none. All right, so no vertical shift, so I would start with my amplitude. My maximums will be at 2. Minimum's at -2. Phase shift is pi to the right, so I start at pi. My period is 2 pi, so my first one ends at 3 pi. I'm graphing a sine function, so that means start at 0, end at 0, middle at 0. And we go up first, then down, and then follow my pattern. I don't even have to think about what sine's supposed to be like. I just go back and forth and then connect. And there you go. Now this one has everything going on. All right, so our amplitude is 2. The period is 2 pi over 1/2, which is 4 pi. Phase shift is pi to the right. Vertical shift is 3 down. All right, I like to start with my vertical shift, 3 down. Amplitude is 2, so my maxes are at -1. My minimums are at -5, which is off my graph, but we'll use our imaginations. I had a phase shift of pi to the right, so my starting point is now pi. My period is 4 pi, so that means I end my first period at 5 pi. Now I look, it is sine. Sine starts at 0, ends at 0, middle at 0. Instead of 0, we're using -3. And it goes up first, and then down. Follow my pattern. And we have our graph. There we go. All right, sine of -x minus pi over 4 minus 2. This one, our b value may only be -1, but it's still not factored out. So we need to factor out that negative. Makes it x plus pi over 4 minus 2. So our amplitude is 1. Our period is 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. But there's a reflection over the y-axis. Our phase shift is pi over 4 to the left. And our vertical shift is 2 down. All right, so vertical shift first, 2 down. Amplitude is 1, so I go 1 above that and 1 below. My phase shift is pi over 4 to the left. My period is 2 pi, so one of them would have gone right here. but then I reflect everything over the y-axis. So instead of reflecting over the actual y-axis, we reflect over this line right here, our vertical shift, or our phase shift. So instead of going pi over, or 2 pi to the right, we actually are going to count 2 pi to the left. So over here is really where I'm going to end that first period. So I start at 0, end at 0, middle at 0. I go up and then down. So really I'm just going to the left of my phase shift instead of to the right. On the right, I do follow my pattern. Make sure I'm following the right pattern here. There we go. And we'll be there shortly. If you're ever at home and you forget, uh-oh, I don't remember exactly what order to graph it in. I've got this graph, how do I know if it's right? Graph it on your calculator. I graphed also like y equals -2, just to give me an idea of where that line was. All right, just a couple more examples for you. This first one, we need to factor out our b value. So 2 cosine of 1/2, -1/2. Ooh, the x is in the back. And actually, what am I doing? I just need to take out a negative. So it's 2 cosine of negative x minus pi over 2 plus 1, which means our amplitude is 2. Our period is still 2 pi. We just reflect over the y-axis. And if you remember from before, a reflection over the y-axis with cosine actually does nothing. We have a phase shift of pi over 2 to the right and a vertical shift of 1 up. So 1 up, start there. Amplitude of 2, maxes are at 3. Minimums are at -1. Phase shift, pi over 2 to the right, start there. Period of 2 pi, but there's a reflection, so we actually go 2 pi to the left. All right, we start graphing. This is a cosine. Cosine starts at a max, ends at a max. Centered, min. Middles are the zeros. And then follow my pattern. Make sure you're using the right lines as your maximums, minimums, and centers. Notice that this graph looks exactly the same as if I hadn't done that reflection at all. All right, only 2 left. There we go. So our first task is to identify the features. So the amplitude here is 3. There's a reflection over the x-axis. Our period is just 2 pi. The phase shift is 3 pi over 2 to the left. And the vertical shift is 1 down. All right, start with 1 down. Amplitude is 3, so our maxes are at 2. Mins at -4. Phase shift 3 pi over 2 to the left. Period is 2 pi, so we'd end at pi over 2. And then we reflect over the x-axis. Notice that I don't actually reflect any of this over the x-axis. It just changes whether I go up or down. So instead of starting at my maximums, I start at my minimums, right? My centers are at the max. And then the middles. Middle, up, middle, down, middle, up, middle, down, middle. There we go. And there is our graph. And finally, 4 times the sine of x minus pi. We start off with our amplitude. Our amplitude here is 4. Our period is 2 pi. The phase shift is pi to the right. And the vertical shift is none. So we're keeping 0 as our kind of center. Amplitude is 4, so that means we go up to positive 4. We go down to negative 4. Our phase shift is pi to the right, so I'm going to start at pi. Our period is 2 pi, so that means my first period ends at 3 pi. It's sine, so sine starts at 0, ends at 0, middle at 0. Start, middle, end, and it goes up first, then down. And then fill in some more points. And there's our graph.